I am going to show you a strategic masterpiece played by Grandmaster D. Gukesh. There are going to be 6 learnings, 6 practical takeaways. By the end of it, I hope you will be able to apply those ideas, apply those strategies in your games. I'm also going to show you the nuances of the opening. So do watch the video till the very end and let's begin. With the black pieces is playing Gukesh and with the white pieces is playing Dukic Zachary. Apologies if I get the pronunciation wrong. This game was played in the Sunway Formentera Open Chess Tournament in 2022 and this was the first round. I remember Gukesh was in very good form that time. He had already won 1 or 2 tournaments before he came to play this one. Okay, this was played in the first round. White starts with e4. Gukesh plays c6, d4, d5. We have the Caro-Kann opening on the board and white plays e5. This is known as the advanced variation of the Caro-Kann defense. It's considered a very good way for white to fight for an advantage. Black plays the move bishop to f5, developing the bishop, h4. This is the Tal variation of the advanced Caro-Kann. Again, a very aggressive line and black has to know his theory. This brings us to the first moment or the first strategy that I want to show. So here black has 2 ways. Black can play h5 or black can play h6. The idea of both these moves is after h5 or h6, let's say whenever white goes g4, this bishop can directly drop back to h7. Okay, that's the idea. But in this position, Gukesh decides not to go with h5 or h6. Instead, he plays the move queen to c8. So what is the idea of queen to c8? Well, now if white pushes g4, black is going to capture the pawn. So why did Gukesh go for this move instead of the main line with h5 and h6? Now, you see this game was played in the first round. And in the first round, often what happens that the stronger player, like for example, Gukesh is 2600 and his opponent is 2200. The higher rated players, they want to avoid the preparation of the lower rated players. Another reason is, let's say Gukesh has some opening ideas in h5 or h6 that he has, let's say, reserved for players against of around 2600. Then he doesn't want to reveal that preparation in this game itself. Okay, he wants to keep that idea against stronger players. After queen c8, white plays h5. White is saying, black, you cannot play e6 because if you play e6, I'm going to push g4. You cannot go with bishop to e4 because after f3, your bishop would get trapped. h5, black has to now make a decision. He wants to play e6, but how does he do that? So he has to play h6, which is what black plays in the game. Now after h6, now black can play e6, so that g4, this bishop can simply drop back to h7. White continues his development with knight c3, black plays e6, bishop e3, and now this brings us to the second moment or the second important strategy that you are going to learn from this video. Here, black wants to play c5. Why? Because after he plays c5, his pieces are going to have more space. But if black right now goes c5, it doesn't work. Because after c5, there is no one to guard this square and this diagonal is getting exposed. So white plays bishop to b5 check, hitting the king. Now what to do for black? If black goes knight d7, white captures the pawn on c5. And the problem for black is, they cannot capture this pawn back. Because there is bishop into d7 check. Now if you capture with the queen, you lose this bishop. So that doesn't work. So after bishop to d7 check, black has to capture with the king. Very bad, especially with the queen on the same line as the king. And white plays the move knight to d5. Winning a pawn. If black captures, there is queen into d5 check. The king has to move, and on the next move, white will simply capture back the bishop. Okay? So for that reason, in this position, c5 doesn't work. Okay? But black wants to play c5. How can you do that? Well, Gukesh here plays a very nice prophylactic move. He plays the move a6. Now this square is covered, and on the next move, black is going to push c5. Okay? So again, think about it. Think about making such prophylactic moves in your games. So a6 happened. g4, bishop h7. The bishop goes back. f4. And now as per plan, c5, striking in the center. Knight f3. c into d4. Knight into d4. And now bishop b4. Also notice after cd4, knight d4, this queen has an open c file. Okay. And from this file, it can put pressure on the knight. Now now the best move for white was to go queen d2 and protect this knight. But here instead white decide that they would gambit their pawn and go for fast development with the move bishop to d3. So black captures the knight, bc3, and queen c3 check, king f2. Now this brings us to the third moment in the game. What will you play if you're black? Now many players, what they could do here is, okay, opponent has offered a bishop, so let me take it, bishop into d3. But the problem here is after c into d3, you open the c file for the white rook, and your king is gonna have a very hard time to castle, because if let's say you decide to play the move knight e7, there is suddenly rook c1, queen a3, rook c7, the rook gets inside the position. Okay, you could castle, yes, but you'll also lose this pawn. So because of this, you don't want to open the c file so quickly here, okay, with the move bishop to d3. That's why after king to f2, Gukesh makes a very nice move. I like to call this trade on your terms, okay, or exchange on your terms. He plays the move bishop to e4, and he says to white, yes, I know you wanted to capture my bishop. Okay, we can have the trade, but we are going to have the trade on the e4 square, so that the position remains closed and my king has enough time to go and castle here. Trading is very much like negotiation, and yeah, you want to make sure that the trades you make are on terms that are favorable to you. Of course, it doesn't happen always, but that's what strong players strive for. So bishop to e4, opponent played queen b1, hitting this pawn. Gukesh had to drop back with the queen and defend it. Bishop into e4, d into e4. Okay, and now c4. This pawn is under attack. White is giving up this pawn. But anytime black captures this pawn, the white rooks are going to have a field day. You know, they are going to get an open c file to come into the game, and they'll be very happy. So after c4, Gukesh prefers to develop his pieces and plays knight e7. Queen e4 happened, cobbling the pawn. You could think of castling, but after castling, the problem is black gets time to, you know, attack your b7 pawn. Now suddenly there is a big problem you have with the pawn. How do you defend it? If you play knight c6, it's gonna go knight into c6, and if you go knight into c6, bishop b6, this queen is like, it can go queen to c7, rook d1. Your rooks are not really gonna get on this file. It's very hard position for black. At the same time, if let's say you go queen into c6, then it's even worse. White will capture this queen, you capture with the pawn, and there is bishop to c5, pinning the knight, rook e8, rook b7. This knight is in a very sad situation. It's attacked twice, so it has to move. Let's say it goes to knight to c8, and it's completely dominated by this bishop. This bishop controls all the squares where the knight can go. It can just never come into the game. And if the knight doesn't come into the game, this rook can also not come into the game. It's a terrible position for black, okay? You don't want to make such mistakes. So here you have to be careful. Black plays the move knight to d7. Now if you go rook b1, there is knight c5, and this knight guards this pawn and at the same time attacks this queen. Okay, so you want to be precise, you want to be careful, you want to look for opponent's ideas. Knight d7 happened. White decided to play king g2. Now black decides to go short castle. Okay, this looks a little risky, like all of white pawns are so forward. So can it be like white can instantly start an attack on the black king? Well, not exactly, because let's say if white goes g5, don't be afraid, you can just take this pawn. If let's say now they play h6, you can just play the move g6. Okay, you don't want to open the file for the rook. h7, yeah, just put the king in front of the pawn, and this king is completely safe. It's blockading this pawn very nicely. This is a very typical defensive motive, to put the king in front of the pawn when they give a check like this. Okay, so short castle, even though the king looks in danger, it's not really. Okay, so white decides to play rook a c1. This rook comes here and guards this c4 pawn. Black plays knight to c5, hitting at the queen, queen f3. Now, the fourth moment in the game. What will you play here with the black pieces? Okay, so here I think many would like to play something like rook a8, then rook hf1, rook d7. Let's say you put the rook on d file. You know, it's a very logical move. You put the rooks on the open file. But in the game, Gukesh sees that there is one small factor, one small nuance, which he could exploit. And that is, this queen and this rook are on the same file. And at the same time, This king, if let's say we could get rid of all these pawns, this king would start to feel a little bit unsafe. Because all his pawns are forward. So if we exchange all the pawns, somehow, this king, we could have some attacking possibilities against this king. Okay. Because of this factor and also the fact that the queen hates to be in front of the rook, Gukesh plays a very, very nice motif or a very, very typical idea in this position. F6. Notice how this knight protects this pawn so that, this knight cannot capture here. And F6. Next move, black is threatening to take this pawn on E5. So white again has to take this pawn. He plays E into F6, rook into F6. Knight E2 happened in the game. Now black gets an initiative. Okay, black attacks. Black plays knight to D3, hitting out at the rook. The rook has to go to C3. And now the black knight jumps back to E5. Okay, remember this queen hates to be in front of the rook. This is a good example why. Because anytime this pawn moves, boom, the queen is lost. So after knight E5, the queen is attacked. Where can the queen go? The queen decides to go to H3. And now there comes queen C6 check. This diagonal is very, very weak. There is no way for white to put any piece in the middle to protect it. So the king has to go to H2. Now there comes knight F3 check. The king comes to G3. And now Gukesh plays a very beautiful move, knight to G5. Okay, remember, I told you this king is a little bit exposed here. And if we are able to get rid of some of the pawns, we can attack it. So knight G5 is a very nice move because white cannot take here. There is rook F3 check and white loses the queen. And later they lose the game. After knight G5, white plays knight D4. White counter attacks, hitting this queen. And also there is this knight's unprotected. So black decides to play a very nice move, queen to C7. Now this queen is pinning this pawn. So this pawn cannot move. Okay, now and at the same time this knight is attacking the queen. So what can white do? White decides to run away with the queen. Now one more piece black introduces into the attack. He plays the move knight to D5. Now this knight is attacking this knight is attacking this. If white captures the pawn like this, they are simply losing the rook. But instead of capturing the knight, white plays knight into E6. White is also trying to complicate the position. Now after knight to E6, this queen is attacked. So if you take the rook, you lose this queen. You don't want to do that. So black decides to take with the rook first. Now the white queen comes and takes this knight. Remember, there is no pawn to capture back the queen. There is a rook. There is no pawn. And now this rook is pinned. But see how nicely this knight protects the rook. And because this knight protects the rook, black doesn't have to spend any time to defend it. Black can play very quickly the move rook d8 and ask this queen to get out of the position, to get out of the d5 square. The white queen goes to f5. Now there comes the move knight to e4 check. Knight to e4 check. King to h3. And now this brings us to the fifth moment in the game. You want to always try to attack and defend at the same time. So here your rook is attacked, but if you move the rook, it's just a defensive move. You're just running away with the rook. Is there a way you can play a move that defends your rook and at the same time attacks, keeps your threats in the position or creates a new attack? There is. Black plays a very beautiful move, queen to c6. This queen protects this rook first, and at the same time it watches this long diagonal, so that anytime this knight moves, this rook is going to be hanging. And at the same time, black is also threatening this rook. This rook has to run away. Now here, black plays the move rook f6. Black secures his rook to the g-pawn and frees the queen of the duty of protecting the rook. White queen goes to e5. And now the final moment in the game is always be alert to tactics. Tactics are everywhere, and without tactics, you will not be able to convert your strategic advantage into a win. Okay, so always watch out for tactics and be ready to calculate. Gukesh plays the move knight to g5 check. It is a knight sacrifice, but remember this queen is also hitting the rook on h1. In this position, white resigned, because after f into g5, they are simply losing this check. There's a check here, king h2, let's say king g3, and there is rook f3. Checkmate. I hope you liked Gukesh's beautiful game, and I hope you learned something from this video. If you did, do hit the like button and do subscribe to my channel for more such instructive videos. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in another video. Bye bye.